This week's parsha is Parshas Vayakhal and Pekudei. We have two parshas this week, and the subject, once again, is about the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and the vessels that are in the tabernacle. And it goes through great lengths to discuss the exact measurements and how things should be made, and so on. The most common feature in the tabernacle and the Mishkan is that everything was right angle. It was all square or rectangular. And it's an interesting observation because you see even things that are normally not made as a square or as a rectangle. In the temple, they were made as a square or rectangle. Just think about it for a second. First of all, just the normal things you have. The tabernacle itself was a rectangle. The Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, was a rectangle. The Mizbeach, the altars, were squares, I believe. Basically, almost anything you find in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, is square. And the same thing actually is true in the mitzvahs that we do. We find that there are very strict laws about the squareness of tefillin. Tefillin have to be exactly square. We find also the idea of square or rectangular right angle by tzitzis. A garment is obligated to have tzitzis on it if it's a four-cornered garment, specifically four-cornered. One other observation before we get onto the explanation is that even things that are normally round, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, and in the tabernacle too, they were square. Think about the lechem hapanim, the showbread. The showbread, even though a loaf of bread is normally round, we're not talking about your, store-bought Wonder Bread, but your normal loaf in ancient times and today too, if you buy a loaf of bread from a proper bakery, it's going to be round, or it's going to be an elongated round shape. It's not going to have right angles. And in the tabernacle and in the temple, on the shulchan, what was put was bread that was in the shape of a square, of a rectangle, or I think it was a square actually. So what's with this heavy emphasis on the right angle, on the square, on the rectangular, and especially when it comes to the altar, the strictness of the law of keeping it square goes down that it can't even, if you were to run your fingernail along the side of the altar, if it would get caught on something that's not perfectly smooth, to break that squareness, the altar is disqualified. So obviously, having a square, this squareness, this rectangularness, I'm sure those aren't words, is very important. What's the reason why we focus on this so much? So Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch says that, of course, the roundness of shapes is the natural form of shapes. You find almost no natural things on earth that are square. In fact, I can't think of any, or rectangular. For sure not perfectly square or perfectly rectangular. And the idea of having this the natural course of creation to be round is exactly why everything in the tabernacle and the temple was square. Because on this earth, what we're supposed to do is shape and fashion what we have. Everything we have may be raw materials exactly the way Hashem wants it to be, but our duty on this earth is to take that and shape and form it, to utilize it for Hashem's purposes. Therefore, in the temple, which is the idea of what we do on this earth to further Hashem's goals, everything has to be square because it's exactly the opposite of creation. We're trying to change the creation, or I don't want to say change, we're trying to uplift the creation. To do that, we have to take that roundness, the natural form of the world, what it would be by instinct, and form it into that square. That's the idea why the tabernacle and the temple, everything was square. Almost everything was square. Okay, anyway, a quick question on this week's parsha. It's actually on the four parshas. We find in Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayakhal, Pekudei, four parshas that all discuss the tabernacle and what you find in it. The dimensions, how they're made, the quality, the form, the materials. and it goes through tremendous amount of verses, very uncharacteristic of the Torah. We find in other areas of halacha, not the tabernacle, not the temple, that from very sparse verses we derive piles of laws, tons and tons of laws. And for some reason, when it came to the tabernacle and the temple, Hashem decided that the verses should be very explicit. And this isn't the case by the vast majority of halacha, of law, of Jewish law, the law is based on very minute observations, inferences, parallel, contrasts. And if you've ever read a Gemara, you would experience it. It's just this tremendous amount of very, very, very careful reading of verses that we build the laws that we observe. But when it comes to the Mishkan, when it comes to the tabernacle, the Torah goes very, very detailed. Why is that? Why go through all these 4 parshas? You're talking about almost half a sefer. Why do we go through all this very, very carefully as opposed to the rest of the laws that we learned from the Torah? Have a great Shabbos.